It strikes without warning and kills in an instant.
Came to 24 exit wounds and stopped my heart.
It can shatter a plane, drive a train, and even raise the dead.
When you need a shock, you need it now.
Few forces on Earth compare to the raw power of an electric jolt.
The lethal dose only has to be there for a fraction of a second in order to cause death.
So be afraid, very afraid, because now it's most shocking on Modern Marvels. The dangers of electric shock are 100% real. Rarely do you see it coming, and never is mercy shown. Yet corral its deadly power, and electric shock can be shaped into ingenious, sometimes controversial tools.
Holy cow.
Perhaps none more so than the products made at Taser International, manufacturers of the leading non-lethal weapon technology in the world. Today, CEO Rick Smith has something to prove. He's just been completely immobilized by the shocking power of a police-issued Taser X26. His point? That despite recent controversy, this weapon is as safe as it is effective.
I've been hit with it 7 times myself. And it's not fun, it's very uncomfortable, it's scary because you can't control your own body. But the moment it shuts off, you're right back to normal.
Pain is not what makes the Taser work. And the goal is to incapacitate, then subdue quickly. Not harm.
Before Taser, the only other choice I have would be no tools and try and take you down physically. Very dangerous, somebody's gonna get hurt. Or I go to my gun. 50% chance I'm going to kill you, 50% chance you're gonna live with a life-altering injury.
Tasers take the most dangerous scenarios off the table. No batons, no bullets, and from a distance of upwards of 35 feet.
Okay, calm down, calm down.
This device keeps you from going hands-on where most of the injuries occur. That's where we're seeing all these dramatic injury reductions in the field. And we're also stopping people that normally wouldn't be stopped by pain compliance. Baton, pepper spray, canine bites, that's not gonna stop a guy on methamphetamines. This little trick will do it. It'll certainly do it.
That's why it's being so well received, because it's the only device that works well against your aggressive, most dangerous subjects where you don't have to kill them.
Here's how it works. Once the target has been laser sighted, a pull of the trigger air blasts 2 electronic probes toward the target. Made from ordinary fishhooks, the probes lodge into the target's skin or clothing, while wires keep the probes connected to a power source within the gun, which begins to disperse electric charges.
We just deployed the Taser X26. We actually dispersed 2 probes, one positive, one negative, and being opposites, the energy attracts. So in the human body, we can actually create a circuit of energy from this device into the body, knocking that person down instantly.
This device sends 19 pulses every second into your body. And as each of those pulses transmits through the body, the nerves pick it up, those nerves cause the muscles to twitch. Well, if I do it once a second, it might look like this. If I do it 10 times a second, it might look like this. If I do it 20 times a second, we tend to see those individual twitches become a smooth contraction.
The Taser's electric pulses fire for 5 seconds, long enough for police to subdue the assailant, for whom that brief ride may feel like a lifetime.
You feel better?
Yeah? All right. Thank you.
Not surprisingly, this shocking technology took years to develop.
Jack Cover's original invention came out in 1962. He worked in the late 60s to develop this device right here. This is the original Taser. It's actually an acronym, Thomas A. Swift's electric rifle. That's where the name actually comes from. And it had a 2-shot system. Unfortunately, it used gunpowder. Could not be sold to the public and was treated as a firearm. We actually tracked down Jack Cover and we co-developed what was called the Air Taser. Ran on a 9-volt battery, did pretty well. Actually started off in the sharper image. This is the X26, the next generation device. It came out about 2001. And we extended this, the ability to have a secondary cartridge here, so you can carry a spare right there. Where do you go next? Well, the next was for citizens. The C2 uses a completely different, smaller battery system, uses a totally different new air cartridge system. At the same time, it's much smaller, sleeker, lighter.
All taser systems deliver the same shock. The next advance will be in size and mobility.
We took that whole taser device, the whole X26 that fit in your hand, and we repackage it, and through a lot of engineering, years of engineering, we miniaturize it down to where it fits inside a 12-gauge round. So now, rather than me as the officer holding the power supply and sending the wires to you, we're going to package the whole taser in a self-contained module and fire it. And I, as a user, can move on. If there's multiple threats, I can now engage those multiple threats, and I can do it from much greater distances.
Remarkably, no matter the model, the amount of power required is minimal.
We can get something like 20,000 of those pulses out of a little digital camera battery. So it's actually the fraction of the power it takes for you to take a digital picture, even with the flash off. It takes more power than it does for a taser pulse to interfere with your communication within your body. In terms of the effect of the electricity, all the studies to date have shown that we've got a pretty significant safety margin that it's not going to affect your vital functions like heart rate, breathing, etc.
Controversy still follows the taser, and injuries from falls are not uncommon. But while tasers tightly control their shocking power, that's not so with Mother Nature. In 2000, Mike Utley was struck by lightning while playing golf on Cape Cod, Massachusetts. Utley's playing partner that fateful day was Bill Todd.
We were walking off the green pretty quickly, and I heard the loudest bang I ever heard in my life. And we turned around and we saw Mike falling to the ground, steaming, smoking.
It hadn't started to rain yet, but about 20 seconds after I was hit, the whole sky lit up, and it was lightning and thunder, and it was a massive rain and hail, the whole works. Those guys, Bill and Dick, worked on me for almost 15 minutes before the EMTs to get where we were on the course.
Estimates are that 100 lightning bolts hit the Earth every second. And it doesn't have to rain for those to strike. Lightning is created when moisture, ice, and wind cause positive and negative electric forces within the cloud to separate. Over time, those charges build in intensity until they lead to an electrical discharge, equal to an average of more than 100 million volts, with temperatures of 50,000 degrees Fahrenheit.
You have these huge voltage potentials sitting up in these clouds. It gets to a point where it will ionize a channel through the air, and then all of that energy is dumped through this ionized channel down to the Earth.
Lightning is one of the leading causes of weather-related death, and those who survive are simply lucky.
When did I wake up? My memory starts about 38 days after the incident.
Kisses. Okay.
It fries the body and it fries the brain. I can walk pretty well for a little while and then I'll stumble and fall down. I can go pretty good mentally for a little while and then I'll just blank.
It's all yours. I'm about to let go.
Contrary to popular myth, wearing anything metallic or carrying metal objects like golf clubs does not attract lightning. And in Mike's case, it may have, in part, saved his life.
The majority of the charge went out through the putter and blew a big hole in the ground.
As lightning passed through Utley's body, his iron putter acted like a typical lightning rod, diverting current away from his body to the ground. Just not all of it.
The remainder of the charge went through my body and stopped my heart. So it's possible that the putter stopped me from having more damage, but the reality of it is what little went through my body stopped my heart, and without CPR, we wouldn't be having this conversation.
A Japanese professor captured this remarkable image of a Boeing 747 hit by lightning just after takeoff.
Most of the lightning strikes occur from extremity to extremity. So the lightning strike can occur at one end of the airframe. The current is passed through the airframe and exits the other end or out a wingtip.
Odds are high that every U.S. airliner will be struck by lightning once a year. But no U.S. plane has crashed because of it since 1962, when a spark caused gas fumes to explode. Part of what protects many airliners is simply that they're made of aluminum, a very good electrical conductor that keeps a majority of the electric charge flowing on the plane's exterior, then into the air. Everything inside, including the passengers, remains safe. A researcher at Boston's Museum of Science demonstrates this principle using a Van de Graaff generator to simulate lightning's shocking power.
It's called the skin effect because as long as I don't touch the outside of the cage, I'll be perfectly safe, even as it's struck with over 1.5 million volts and a lethal amount of electrical energy.
But that doesn't mean airliners are free and clear.
It basically can affect any of the electrical systems in the airplane and cause the airplane to do things that the pilot's not telling it to do. And if you're at 35,000 feet, that's not a big deal, a little hiccup here or there. If you're, 50 or 100 feet off the ground coming into land, you get struck by lightning. It could easily put the airplane into a dive and put it into a very bad situation.
DNB Engineering is a leader in lightning technology and houses one of the world's most sophisticated lightning simulators.
We did a 200,000 amp high current test, and as you can see, we did some significant damage to it.
Delivering blasts of over 1 million volts or 200,000 amps of current. DNB's simulator provides invaluable data to those who create lightning countermeasures. That includes the makers of this seemingly simple tape, the most effective means to protect a plane's eyes and ears. It's radar.
What we want to do is intercept those lightning strikes. We place our device on the surface of the radome, and we place them around the antenna that's inside it.
When the lightning's initial electric charge hits, it races through the radome toward the radar inside. Gaps in the tape's patterned copper surface cause the electric spark to jump from one gap to the next. Once all the gaps are closed, a complete ionized channel is created, through which the remainder of the electric charge passes onto the plane's exterior, then into the air.
One way you can look at it is like your heart. You have a rib cage around your heart, and you have the ribs surrounding your heart. Well, our diverters are placed around that radar system inside there, and it serves the same purpose.
Here, tests at DNB proved the tape's remarkable effectiveness, as multiple blasts of 100,000 volts of man-made lightning are diverted along the tape. DNB engineers use every precaution to protect themselves from electric shock. And so should you.
It's simple stuff. Pay attention when thunder roars, go indoors. Boom. Pay attention to the weather and react.
While most people do their best to avoid shocking situations, there are a few flyboys who seek it out on power lines charged to more than 500,000 volts. During the 1980s, a NASA lightning research project flew an F-106B jet into 1,400 thunderstorms. Despite 700 lightning hits, the plane's exterior experienced little damage, while interior electronics suffered only minor harm. Most Shocking will return on Modern Marvels. We now return to Most Shocking on Modern Marvels. Madison, Wisconsin. A downed power line electrocutes 2 people as they run through the rain for a bus. Despite their distance from the live wire, electricity traveled more than 200 feet through pooled water, killing them instantly. No one saw it coming, yet the results were all too familiar. Electric power lines kill. No one is more aware of that than Spider Lockhart, who spends his days more than 200 feet above the ground, repairing the biggest power lines of all. For him and other linesmen at Haverfield Corporation, working on 500,000 volts is all in a day's work.
It will feel like little ants crawling around between the electrical connection of your gloves to your sleeve of your jacket, or sometimes even around your neck. And you'll get to scratching them just because you think something's on there. And all it is just a stray voltage going across you.
High voltage power lines are the electric lifeblood of America's power grid. Lose a line for even a few hours, and more than customer inconvenience is at stake. So too are millions of dollars. That's where Haverfield comes in, because they can get to even remote locations faster and more efficiently than any ground team.
The beauty of what we do is we can go right directly to the conductor or to the problem site and access it immediately. Once we finish one, we can fly to the next one, so that's very speedy.
It all makes sense, except 90% of all outdoor power lines are not insulated, and they can kill you. The only defense? Experience and the proper tools.
What I've got here is what we call a hot suit. And a hot suit is a steel cage that encloses the lineman.
Made of 25% steel thread and 75% Nomex, a fire retardant material, the hot suit forms a protective metal shell around the linesman. Just like the aluminum shell of an airliner, and another example of the skin effect.
When they put that on, the electricity itself will flow over the lineman instead of going to the lineman itself. So we can safely work on these high voltages.
Once set, it's time to fly.
We'll fly about 30 to 40 miles an hour down the line. These are fast patrols, and what they do, they will visually see any major problems that that line may have.
The relationship between linesman and helicopter pilot must be one of absolute trust, and communication is essential.
We are attached together on that platform, whether I'm standing on the skid or on the platform itself. So if anything goes wrong, it's both of us in it together. So do we trust each other? Yes.
The biggest danger is an electric booby trap, invisible to the human eye. As an electric charge races through the power line, it builds up electric potential, creating electromagnetic fields that envelop the line like a halo. Stay outside the fields and the danger is minimal. But get too close, and the electricity will leap like a lightning bolt, and sometimes with deadly consequences.
Where that energized wire is, you have to be a minimum of 12 feet away from it. Otherwise, that electricity will jump over to you, and if you're close to it, then that will kill you.
To prevent this from happening, the crews at Haverfield use a simple metal rod to draw and control the potentially deadly arc.
The way we do that is we take our rod, and once we get inside that field, that 12 feet, we have that rod extended, and once it gets close enough, the electrical connection between that wire and the platform will jump to the end of the rod.
Once the copter gets close enough, the linesman touches the rod to the power line, minimizing the arc, and allowing the line's electromagnetic fields to race across and envelop the copter and linesman.
And from that point on, we are energized at 500,000 volts.
Once energized, Spider attaches a clamp known as a platform bond to provide a more secure connection than the rod.
If the helicopter needs to pull off, For whatever reason, everything's breakaway. We do not attach ourselves permanently to the wire itself. So once I have this attached to the conductor itself, I can lay the rod down and I can proceed to go to work from that point on. You get out there and you would think being out in the middle of nowhere, it would be very pristine and quiet. It is not. It is very noisy up there. Once you're sitting there energized at 500,000 volts, what you hear is that field of electricity flowing around that wire, and it is noisy.
Out on the line, the linesman performs detailed inspections, as well as any necessary repair work. And that bag the linesman brings with him not only holds his equipment, but also a rope ladder system, should he become stranded or need to evacuate quickly. But does this mean the entire process is shockproof? Sure, so long as everything goes according to plan. Sometimes it doesn't. In 1988, Spider's metal rod fell, and it took an immediate electric shock to the leg.
Gave me 24 exit wounds and stopped my heart. Once they got me on the ground, I had a gentleman that performed CPR on me and got my heart back started. Do I get scared? If you're not scared, you're not safe.
Bravery and training may be the keys for electric linesmen. But at prisons across the United States, not even the most hardened prisoner will risk a ride on these shocking wires. According to the National Safety Council, your odds of being killed by an electrical transmission line during one calendar year are approximately 3 million to 1. Over the course of your lifetime, the odds diminish to about 40,000 to 1. Most Shocking will return on Modern Marvels. We now return to Most Shocking on Modern Marvels. There is no more ominous symbol of electricity's power than the electric chair. To date, more than 4,000 people have absorbed its shocking power. And only one, convicted murderer Willie Francis, who benefited from an incompetent electrician, lived to tell about it. Today, the chair is rarely used, but that doesn't mean electric shock doesn't still play an integral role in prison life. Kern Valley State Prison, Delano, California. Home to 5,000 prisoners, nearly all of whom are level 4, max security, the worst of the worst. But if you expect to see armed officers in every tower, you'd be mistaken. That's old school. Today, the best deterrent doesn't come at the end of a gun, but rather through the shocking power of this faceless killer, a lethal electrified fence. Touch it once, and you're a goner.
What makes a fence lethal is not necessarily the voltage. Like static electricity can put 10,000 volts by rubbing your feet on the rug and you touch a doorknob. What makes it lethal is a large amount of current passing through the body. 70 milliamps, 71,000ths of an amp, is typically considered lethal. This puts out 1.5 amps, which is 20 times the lethal dose.
Electrified fencing has been used as a lethal deterrent since World War I. In that era, nothing stood between the deadly wires and those that dared to go near it. Recent decades have seen increased demand for more prisons, and with it, renewed interest in the shocking power of electrified fences.
In the 1980s, the California Department of Corrections Rehabilitation went on an expanded building program. We went from 12 facilities to now we have in excess of 30. In doing so, we looked at savings everywhere and increasing security. And it was suggested to use an electrified fence.
No longer are armed officers required in every tower, saving the state millions, while never letting anyone forget the stakes.
So if you brush up against it, even just a little bit of a touch, you've as good as touched it, and you get that lethal dose.
The Delano fence features 16 wires supported by 12,000-volt insulators on posts of galvanized steel. Woven nylon mesh surrounds the lower 9 wires to deter birds and other animals.
The metal posts are grounded, both with the foundation and with a copper ground wire, to make sure that if there's any contact between the wire and a person and the fence posts, that we have a good conductive path.
Each wire is made of 6 strands of stainless steel, woven over a copper core, which increases conductivity. Not surprisingly, access to this no-man's land is strictly supervised, and a tightly controlled procedure is undertaken to gain access, even if it were to rescue a potential escapee.
What we're getting ready to do is we're getting ready to de-energize the electrified fence. That's what we call when we take the fence down, so staff can go inside the fence line. So at this time, I'm going to ask for authorization from the watch commander.
Only after armed officers confirm the area is clear does the watch commander give the okay.
Finishing up now. All zones clear.
Copy. Is the fence check complete?
10-4. All zones clear.
Like something out of Mission Impossible,
You guys just step over there.
a series of switches must be turned in exact sequence in order to power down the fence and release the key to the gate. And for security reasons, that sequence remains highly confidential.
If you've done it and done it correctly, you will be able to retrieve the key, which is encapsulated always inside here for just this entire section.
And even in a potential escape, a final voltage test is required to confirm each wire is de-energized. That may seem like a lot of steps, but make no mistake. With this deadly technology, there are no second chances. And so far, not even the most hardened criminals have been willing to risk it.
Prior to the electrified fence, there were occasions that inmates had escaped over the fences with towers in place. Since the electrified fences have been installed, there's not one successful escape through an electrified fence in California as of this date.
Few things rival a lethal fence's shocking power, and only one stands in plain sight for millions of commuters every day. It's known as the third rail.
Right now we're riding the Blue Line. We just left the Frankfurt Transportation Center and we're heading towards Center City. The Blue Line is a third rail system that utilizes 600-volt DC to power our trains. As we head into the city now, you can see the rail system here to the side.
Look down into any subway track, and the third rail is the one that parallels the 2 main tracks, providing power to the train. Put even a single foot on it, and odds are you're toast. Contact is made by a series of metal plates attached to each train car. These are known as shoes, and they slide along the bottom face of the third rail.
Most third rails are usually a combination of aluminum and steel. It has to be as big as it is because we are pulling at times 10,000 amps, and if it were smaller, it would actually melt.
As the shoes and rail touch, the shoe draws the current into the car's electrical system.
We're underneath the Market Frankfurt subway elevator train, and this is how we get the power from the third rail. We take 600 volts through the third rail shoe. We bring it into our propulsion inverter, which then changes the DC power to AC power. And then we bring it back into an AC motor, and that's what gives our train the propulsion and takes it up and down the line.
The power drives the motor as well as the lights and air conditioner, then returns back through the rails on which the train rides. In essence, a subway train is a simple, if massive, circuit.
The positive side is the third rail system, and the negative is the rail. Our substation is basically the battery. The wire coming from the substation goes to the third rail. The train uses the power and then returns it through the wheels of the train back to the running rails, and the rails are connected with another cable back to the substation, so it completes a complete circuit.
Most third rails do feature protective covering, but it's there to shield the rail from foreign material, not people from electrocution.
Worst case scenario, if you were to touch the rail and you were to grab hold, the voltage is so high on the system and the currents can get so high that while your hands may only have minor burns, you're actually burning from the inside. It could burn your organs, it could cause internal injuries. So while you may not see a lot of injury on the outside, it'll actually be harming you significantly on the inside.
Electric shockers like the third rail may quickly end your life. But procedures like electroshock therapy can actually restart it. Since 1946, nearly 24 New York City transit workers have been electrocuted by contact with the third rail across the city's 842 miles of subway system. Most Shocking will return on Modern Marvels. We now return to Most Shocking on Modern Marvels. In moments, you will witness an actual electroconvulsive therapy session, ECT, once known as electroshock. Today, ECT is a leading form of medical treatment for people who suffer from severe depression.
When people have exhausted either antidepressant drugs or they've just reached the point where they're so depleted by their depression that they can no longer function or can no longer stand it. These are the people who benefit from ECT.
ECT first rose to prominence in the 1930s.
Some European psychiatrists had observed for decades that when depressed people had a spontaneous epileptic seizure, their depression got better.
Using this insight, doctors began to induce seizures, first with chemicals, then with electroshock. During the 1950s and 60s, variations of electrotherapy were misused. But those historic abuses bear no relation to today's ECT procedures.
Nice deep breaths, okay.
Whenever I mention ECT, people immediately think of Jack Nicholson and One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. It was a terrific performance, but it was an inaccurate depiction of what ECT is actually all about. In fact, it's a much more benign situation than what he depicted.
Nice deep breaths, you're doing great.
During a typical ECT procedure, a dosage of only 30 to 50 joules of electric current is delivered. That's less shock power than is found in a 100-watt light bulb.
These are the treatment electrodes that we use for ECT. They are placed on the head, one on the side of the head and one on the top of the head. It's not a lot of current. Occasionally when I run this through my hand, it feels like a tingling, but it's enough current to trigger a grand mal seizure. The electrical current does nothing therapeutic. It is simply the safest way we have to trigger a grand mal seizure under very controlled circumstances. We put cushions in the mouth so that there is no chance of injury to the teeth during the treatment. And now we'll give the treatment itself. You see a clenching of the jaw during the stimulus. The stimulus is now over, and the patient is having a grand mal seizure. We see slight movement in the hands and the feet, but the main part of the body is motionless during the treatment. Now, during ECT, the same thing happens as happens during an epileptic seizure. The entire brain goes on and off about 3 times per second for as much as a minute. We have no idea why this event, which is usually catastrophic for depressed people, turns out to be therapeutic and sometimes even life-saving.
Side effects include a brief, intense headache and short-term memory loss. Long-term memories are not affected.
That was my concern, that I would lose more of memory or, something important, like that you can't buy, like a childhood memory or my nieces and nephews or who I was.
You awake? Yeah.
I guess I can just say it was a journey for me to first accept, where I was and to believe it could work. So I'm grateful that it was there.
You've seen these in almost every current TV medical drama. The paddles of life. Reversing heart failure through the power of electric shock.
Get him on a monitor. CPR.
Here's how they work when a life is on the line.
Stop CPR. What's my rhythm?
Seconds count because we know that the longer it takes to restart a heart and to establish an airway, the less likely it is that an individual will survive.
Let's get pacer pads on.
Today, those bulky paddles have been replaced by more efficient sticky patches. Yet the technology remains the same.
Lines. I need epi, please.
It's called an external heart defibrillator, the first line of defense during cardiac arrest.
Stand back, clear.
The defibrillator is one of the integral components of the resuscitative effort because without it, you have no way of restarting the heart and reestablishing the normal electrical function of the heart.
A healthy heart has a natural built-in pacemaker that creates electric impulses causing the heart to contract with a regular rhythm and pump the blood. But in cardiac arrest, those natural impulses become chaotic and the heart begins to fail.
Normally, when the heart is beating, it's a coordinated electrical conduction from the top to the bottom, followed by mechanical contraction. Very, very rhythmic and organized. When fibrillation occurs, any organization ceases and the heart is not beating in an effective fashion and not moving blood out to the body.
The two patches are positioned opposite one another with the heart in the middle. An electric charge is applied, creating a brief, intense electric circuit.
The shock makes everything go quiet for a moment. You have to be able to extinguish this sort of chaotic activity of the individual cells. And then once you've extinguished it at all, then the normal conduction system of the heart can allow the heart to get back to the periodic coordinated pumping that you need to have.
Think of it as rebooting your computer. Physio Control in Redmond, Washington, is a leading manufacturer of external defibrillators.
It's about 2,000 volts at about 40 amps of current for the typical person. 40 amps is the amount of current it would take to run, say, your washer or dryer.
Because it's external energy, there are all kinds of issues related to the chest wall, its thickness, how muscular it is, the ribs, because you're going through that tissue to get to the heart. And so the first shock may just be dealing with what's preventing the electricity to get to the heart, and then the second shock may be the shock that actually works.
Stop. Resume CPR, please.
Some studies show that survival rates are as high as 74% when defibrillation is given within 3 minutes of collapse.
Pulse CPR. Is there a pulse?
We got a pulse.
Great job, guys.
When you need a shock, it is the only thing that will help you. Because when you need a shock, you don't need it 20 minutes from now. You don't need it 10 minutes from now. You need it now.
You never, ever get tired of hearing about someone's life being saved. Never.
Neither defibrillation nor ECT are more than a century old. But the true origins of medical shock date back to an ancient world and a strange genus of fish with genuine shocking power. chances of surviving cardiac arrest diminish 10% as every minute passes. So what happens when the victim is flying at 30,000 feet? United States federal law requires airliners to carry an external defibrillator, leading to a 40% survival rate increase for cardiac victims caught in transit. Most Shocking will return on Modern Marvels. We now return to Most Shocking on Modern Marvels. When your car battery dies, you replace it. The same goes for the batteries in your flashlight. But what about the small electric wiring inside of you? Biobatteries, microscopic, implantable, and all natural power sources for your eyes and ears may sound futuristic. In fact, for now, they are. But the key to unlocking their secret may be close, lying in wait in the murky waters of the Amazon. Welcome to the shocking potential of Electrophorus electricus, the electric eel. He has no scales, no teeth, but if you don't show him respect, he will kill you. Just ask this caiman as it nears a high voltage end. A solitary nocturnal hunter, the electric eel can deliver a jolt of more than 600 volts at 1.5 amps.
This guy is only 6 years old. They live past 20, and they can go from 40 to 60 pounds and grow to 9 foot. So you can imagine, an animal that will shock anything to death.
That kind of punch earns the eel the rank of an apex predator, top of the food chain.
It'll eat birds, it'll eat fish, it'll eat pretty much anything it can get in its mouth.
To understand the eel's shocking power is to understand its remarkable physiology.
This is an electric eel collected in 1936 from the upper Amazon, Peru, and it has all the qualities that a shocking electric eel clearly demonstrates. It's got a head, a medium-sized mouth, little pectoral fins. Its anus is located right here, about 20% behind the tip of the snout. And the rest of it, 80% of this fish, is nothing but batteries.
Electric eels possess 3 pairs of organs that generate differing levels of electric charge in order to meet various needs. The sax organ functions like sonar, generating low levels of electricity that orient the eel as it swims.
It's a snapshot of the electrical field around them of what they are. Maybe there's a trunk over here, there's a rock over here, and as they're gliding through the water, they're sensing this and picking it up. Once that picks up something that they may think of as food, they'll head towards that. Their amperage from their hunter's organ or their main organ can now come into play.
As the eel nears its prey, its brain initiates a chemical reaction within the cells of the hunter's and main organs. These organs are composed of thousands of small, flat cells, known as electrocytes, that are stacked in a sequence much like a dry cell battery. When energized, each electrocyte generates a minuscule 0.15 volts. But line them up and fire them at the same time, and the collective jolt is magnified to 600 volts.
So as they get closer to this object, they may be amplifying it, and then if it's really his food, zap, they'll go for it, and then that's it.
The eel focuses the electric charge through its head. And if you think that's comfortable for the eel, well, think again.
When you look closely, when we feed this fish, you can see it jolt its prey, and you can also see it cringe. It does that because it shocks itself, and its brain is feeling that. So its brain is protected by a fatty layer and cartilage so that it doesn't have the same problems that the prey item has when it jolts it and electrifies it.
Throughout the world, there are more than 500 species of fish that generate electricity, including the Mediterranean torpedo fish.
The torpedoes are one of the 4 families of electric rays. They're also called numb fish or cramp fish, and they certainly do numb their prey. It lands above its prey at night and then wraps its fins around it and at the same time zzz, and stuns its prey.
But no shocking fish rivals the electric eel.
You'll see the amount of ability this fish has to suck down something a little larger than itself. And again, this fish will eat almost every day because it's, ooh, okay, well, I got that.
Even indirect contact leads to a good shock.
I got it, my finger was in the water, so yeah, I got it a little bit. Yeah, my heart's racing.
Today's momentary shock, like the one from this electric eel, may well hold the key to tomorrow's latest biomedical advances. Perhaps one day, jump-starting our eyes and ears. It seems surprising that something so dangerous can also prove to be so valuable. But that's true of nearly everything about electric shock. Negative and positive, bonded as one.
Shock 200.